In Zen, usually people say words don't matter, it's all about the practice. So actually the important part is already over. But, well, as a little extra, I want to give a little talk. Yesterday I said it's probably 10 years since I came here for the first time, but I checked, it's 8 years. 2008 was the first time. Actually, the first time I did a session in Europe was at that time. I did, apart from here, I did something, one day, the Zen retreat in France, and 2 days maybe in southern Germany, in Berlin, but the only thing that continues until now is here in Singapore, Esther's place. I think the first time I had contact with Esther was 13 years ago. At the beginning of the century, there was, just after I became the abbot of the monastery where I'm living now, Antaiji in Japan, there was a camera team from Germany, WDR, Westdeutscher Rundfunk. They did a documentary on my life. At the time it was basically only me and my wife living in the monastery with a few visitors. And that aired in a number of kind of regional programs in Germany about 15 years ago. And I think she saw that in TV. And she sent me this newspaper called Ben Bama News, which was, well, she was probably the editor, and kids living in this area were kind of writing articles, interviewing people. So she sent me the newspaper, and it was all in Dutch, so I didn't understand anything. And well, I thought it's just some crazy guy called Ben Bama, and he's sending me this news. So I said, okay, thank you. And she sent it again and again. But it was in Dutch, so I could give it to my kids, but they wouldn't understand. And only a couple of years later, I understood that actually her name was Esther. I thought it was Ben Bama. Anyway, when I did my first trip, I was writing on the homepage, I'm gonna do a trip to Europe for a couple of weeks. If you want to organize something with me, a talk or a session, you're welcome. And then Esther said, please come here. And that's when we did the first session. And this time only half a day, but fourth time. And all of these sessions are good, but I enjoy it especially here because I guess when Zen first came to the West, America and Europe in the 60s and early 70s, it was always kind of like this, kind of really basic, improvised, you had to be flexible, less about form and more about content. People knew why they were sitting, or maybe they didn't know why they were sitting, but they knew that they wanted to be sitting. And for example, the bell, is that your bell?
Yes, I received it.
That's your bell. Oh, great. And the Buddha?
Also,
Oh,
I also received it.
Oh, I see. So Esther's also becoming part of the establishment. But a couple of years ago, she would get the bell from somebody. The Buddha was from somebody. The stick here is from Joseph, and the ink is from Joseph. Now Esther is getting part of the establishment, and there's the Buddha here and the bell here. But before, I think the very first time I used the kind of this wooden stick from the kitchen, and what did I hit with it? We didn't have a bell the first time. And that's really precious, I think, because everywhere now in Europe, in America, Zen has become almost as established as in Japan. So you have these fancy Zen centers with the fancy Buddhas, and sometimes they have these meditation platforms with tatamis, and everybody is proud of their purple robes and their golden slippers and fancy hats and stuff like that. And that's also okay, of course, but every time I come here I enjoy it. I enjoy this atmosphere. And yesterday night we weren't sure if the tent is going to be blowing away, but fortunately it was okay. And some people during the session, they found themselves enjoying some forced sunbathing, which maybe they didn't want to. But it works out. And 4 hours sitting is not so hard, and a 4-day session you can also manage. But what is really important but difficult is to continue over the months and years. And since we did the first session 8 years ago, Esther has continued, and there's actually a small group here. And some of you here also, you're part of groups or have your own groups, and you know that what's really difficult but important is to continue both with yourself and also to give space for people to come. And that's the real hard part. So that I admire a lot, especially like in my case, I have a temple that has a certain tradition, so when people come to my place, they know about it. But if people ask Eska, where's your tradition? Well, Antaiji tradition. So when have you been to Antaiji? Never been to Antaiji. When was your ordination? Did you have Dharma transmission? No. Well, now she has a Buddha, but a couple of years ago, there's no Buddha, there's no bell. But there's a practice going on. That's the real important part. And sitting 4 hours, sitting 4 days, you can do that if you do the effort. But to continue over the years with nothing that sustains you except your own motivation, that's the real hard part. So I'm really glad that this place is still here and there's a group going here, and that I can come here, that I could come here this year. And I hope that we can continue this practice. So also thank you for joining in here and keeping this alive. Today I want to give a small talk about a piece written by Dogen Zenji. In Japanese it's called Gakudoyojinshu. It's the English translation you find in this book, Heart of Zen. There's a German translation on the Antaiji homepage, and also in the book Tag für Tag ist ein guter Tag. Every Day is a Good Day by Sawaki Roshi. It's in the appendix of that German book. If you don't read German, I don't know if there's a Dutch translation, but this English translation is very dependable. It's by Okumura Shohaku Roshi, and he translates the text, the title, as Points to Watch in Practicing the Way. Altogether there are 10 points, and today I can't go through all of the 10 points, but first I want to read the first chapter, which is maybe the longest. Altogether 10, all of them important, but maybe the first one of the most important. The necessity of arousing Bodhimind. Bodhimind. Bodhi is an Indian word which means wisdom, also enlightenment. And when it was translated into Chinese, they used the character for Tao, or the way, to translate this. So sometimes you also find the translation way of the mind of the way, which is also correct translation. Here they chose not to use the translation way, but they say Bodhimind. So what you need in the beginning is Bodhimind, the mind of the way. Dogen Zenji starts to explain what kind of mind that is. Though there are many names for Bodhimind, they all refer to the one mind, one and the same mind. The ancestral master Nagarjuna, which is a famous Indian philosopher who lived 2000 years ago, the ancestral master Nagarjuna said that the mind that solely sees the impermanence of this world of constant appearance and disappearance is called Bodhimind. Therefore, Bodhimind should be understood as the mind that sees impermanence. In Buddhism, we talk a lot about impermanence, that everything is in change. Well, the same was also noticed by ancient Greek philosophers. Everything is changing. That's not only true for everything around us, but for ourselves. We all die. And in Buddhism, we don't think that we were born once in the past and we will die once in the future, but actually we die all the time. And we're born all the time. Somebody in India calculated that it's actually 6,480,000 times a day that we die. I don't know how they made the calculation, but I think the minimum time unit in India was called ksana, and they have 120 of that, which is an equivalent of a second, a little bit longer than a second. And then 60 of those are a little longer than a minute. And 30 of those are about 3/4 an hour, and you got 30 of those, and that makes a day. So you got 30 times 30 times 60 times 120. That's the amount of instants in one day. And the Indians said that the whole universe, including ourselves, appears in an instant and disappears again. So it's a little bit like a movie where you don't see anything moving, but you say a picture, and then the next picture, and the next picture, and you see 24 or so in a second. It's just that you don't notice because it's so fast. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about impermanence in Buddhism. It's not something that could happen to us at any point of time in the future, but something that's already happening now. We're born and we're dying. And we don't notice it because it's happening so fast. But when you think about 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you might realize you were not the same person. And probably the same is true in the future. We will probably not be the same in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now. So when are we changing? Not one day you wake up and you realize I'm not the same anymore. But actually you're changing all the time. It's just you don't notice it over the course of maybe 1 day or 2 days, but when you track back a couple of years, you realize actually I'm not the same. That must be because I'm changing. It's just that usually we don't realize that. That's why we get attached to ourselves. And I need to take care of myself in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So we build up this identity for ourselves. And Bodhimind, Dogen Zenji starts with realizing impermanence. So that's not so much about what is happening around us, but actually there is no core inside myself that I could grasp. Truly, when you see impermanence, egocentric mind does not arise, neither does desire for fame and profit. Why do we have a desire for fame and profit or money? Because we think what I have now I can use tomorrow or next year. But if you realize, even if there's a tomorrow, it's not the same me. It's a different person. Then there's no reason anymore to be more attached to this person than another person. But we don't think so. We think that guy who's called Muho tomorrow is me, is an extension of me. That's why I need to be attached to this guy. He's more important than Joseph, for example.
No.
You think Joseph is more important than Muho? Then you're wrong. You must be wrong. Out of fear of time slipping away too swiftly, practice the way as if you're trying to extinguish a fire enveloping your head. That's a famous expression Dogen uses. We need to practice as if our head is burning. So it's not about gaining enlightenment in 10 years or in 5 years or maybe tomorrow. The only time you can practice and wake up is now. And that's what he means when your head is on fire. Your head is on fire. When your head is on fire, you can't say, well, okay, tomorrow I'll look for some water and maybe I can extinguish the water. Right now, well, I don't know about the rest of you, but many of us who come to the Zen come because they're not satisfied with their lives. They're suffering. And the deeper the suffering, the greater your motivation will be to practice. If your suffering is, well, so la kind of suffering, then, well, I can wait for a year or two, or maybe 3. But if you realize it's only now that I can take care of this question, whatever brings me here. That's what he means with practice, is if your head is on fire. If there's a solution, the only time you can find it is now. Reflecting on the transiency of your bodily life, practice as diligently as the Buddha did when he stood on tiptoe for 7 days. Obviously, he did that at one time. In the Zen transition, he is more famous for sitting under the Bodhi tree. But obviously, at one time, he stood tiptoe for 7 days. Even when you hear the melodious music of kinnara, which is some Indian instrument, I think, when you hear that famous music, or the sound of the kalavinka bird flattering you, it is only the evening breeze blowing in your ears. Even when you see such a beauty as Muho or Seishi, I think these are objects of old Chinese literature. I don't know if they actually existed, but even 2,000 years, 3,000 years, they had some kind of erotic literature in China, and Muho and Seishi are ladies that appear in that literature. So even if those were real and would appear right now in front of your eyes, it is merely a drop of morning dew passing before your eyes. When you have become distant from the bondage of all objects of the senses, you will naturally be in accordance with the principle of Bodhimind. We have such admonishments also in the West, especially in the Middle Ages. I think it's common thread that you find that everything that looks beautiful now will disappear. We don't know when our life will disappear. We could die any time. At that time, just as now, we didn't realize that. Even now, we think dying is something that's going to happen tomorrow, or actually in the far future. Or it might happen to Joseph, but not to me. I don't die. I never died, so those poor fellows around, they might die, but it's not about me. The same fame, profit, money. We think we can keep that. We think it's worth getting remembered. Or now with the internet, anybody can get famous and can have lots of friends on Facebook and lots of clicks. And for some reason we think that's actually worth investing all the time to get a lot of clicks and friends and have more and more friends. But what is it about in the end? What is it about? And I think most or all of you who come here, you have asked yourself that questions. That's why you're here. Of course, we all could make a career, we could make a certain amount of money, amount of friends, but then in the end, what is it all about? That's the question that brings us here, and that's what Dogen Zenji calls arousing Bodhimind. We hear of some in the past who had heard a little of the teaching, and we see some in the present who have seen a little of the sutras. Most of them have fallen into the pitfall of fame and profit and have lost the life of the Buddha way forever. How sad and regrettable this is. So now he's talking about people who have studied Buddhism and practiced the Buddhism and still have fallen into the pitfall of fame and profit. Just as I said, there are so many people being concerned about the color of their robes, the grade they have reached. Just as in kind of judo and karate, you can have the various bells and stuff like that. It's the same with Soto Zen. You kind of, little by little, you climb the ladder. First you ordain as a monk, and then you're the head monk, and then you're Zen master, and after being Zen master again, you climb the ladder. And probably in the beginning, everyone, they had some genuine question. But then, after a couple of years, it just turns into a job like any other job. And you're only kind of comparing yourself with the others. Why does it happen? Because even though in the beginning we have this realization, I don't live forever, I'm actually dying every day. Over the years, that fire isn't burning that strong anymore. And even Esther is getting her personal Buddha. And comparing her, well, maybe in Nijmegen they have the bigger Buddha, smaller Buddha. Who has the best bell? My bell sounds better than your bell. So at Dogen Zenji's time in Japan, the same thing happened. Most have fallen into the pitfall of fame and profit and have lost the life of the Buddha way forever. How sad and regrettable this is. You should thoroughly understand that even if you study the provisional or direct teachings, here's referring to, in Japanese it's called Tendai and Shingon. Shingon is esoteric Buddhism, it's kind of related to Tibetan Buddhism. While Tendai is studying the whole range of Buddhist sutra. That's called the provisional teachings, while the direct teachings is the Mikkyo, the esoteric approach. Or you receive instruction on the traditional scriptures of the esoteric or exoteric teachings. Unless you completely give up the desire for fame and profit, you cannot arouse true Bodhimind. Some say that Bodhimind is the mind of Anuttara Samyaku Sambodhi, transcending fame and profit. You can't see it if you're sitting in the back, but Joseph had on his t-shirt, he has the Hanya Shingyo, which is kind of in Zen. You read that, well, in some places they do it every day. They chant the sutras every day, and that's probably the most famous among them. It's pretty short, so it takes about maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes. It's not a long sutra, but in the center you got this Anuttara Samyaku Sambodhi, which means supreme, unsurpassable Bodhimind. And it's the original Indian word for Bodhimind. So when Dogen Zenji here says, some say that Bodhimind is the mind of Anuttara Samyaku Sambodhi, these people are actually giving the correct definition of Bodhimind. That's actually how Bodhimind was called in India. And Dogen Zenji here says, some say that Bodhimind is the mind of Anuttara Samyaku Sambodhi, transcending fame and profit. And that's correct. Some say that Bodhimind is the mind that contemplates the 3,000 realms in the space of a single thought. Whatever that means. Well, basically the whole universe exists in this moment. In this one moment, the reality that you're experiencing right now contains the whole universe. And Bodhimind consists in this realization. That also seems to make sense. It's not the same definition, but right here, right now, in this moment, what we experience is the whole universe. Sounds good to me. Some say that Bodhimind is the Dharma gate to the mind that does not bear thought. So basically, well, no mind, empty mind. What we try to have in Zazen. But more often we have a full mind. But if we could have a mind without any thoughts, that would be a good thing. And here he says that some people define Bodhimind in exactly that way. Still others say that Bodhimind is the mind that enters the realm of the Buddha. That also makes sense. Bodhimind is the mind of a Buddha. Bodhimind enters the realm of a Buddha. All of these definitions seem to make perfect sense, but Dogen Zenji says, These people do not understand Bodhimind. Moreover, they recklessly slander it. So he's criticizing all these definitions. He says, whoever defines Bodhimind in this way does not understand Bodhimind. They are awfully far from the Buddha way. Why does Dogen Zenji say that? Take a close look at the egocentric mind restlessly seeking fame and profit. Is it possible to realize the nature and form of the 3,000 realms in the space of a single thought? Does egocentric mind manifest the Dharma gate to the mind that does not bear thought? There's only the delusory mind which is thirsty for fame and clings to profit. There's nothing that can be regarded as Bodhi-mind. So I think that Dogen Zenji does not find fault with the definitions themselves. So he's not saying that the definition is wrong, but what he's saying is look at yourself. You define Bodhi-mind in a lot of fancy ways. But look at that robe you're wearing, and look at that face you're making, and look at the whole pretense. You're talking about Bodhi-mind, but all you're concerned is with fame and profit at the end of the day. So Dogen Zenji, rather than referring to these difficult concepts, he's saying just look at impermanence in this moment. Right now you're living and dying. And if you really realize that, that's already Bodhi-mind. There's no need to talk about the universe appearing in one moment. There's no need to talk about the realm of a Buddha when we've never seen it. There's no need to bring in difficult Indian words like Anutara Samyaku Sambodhi. Let's just talk about impermanence right now. There have been sages who completed the way, attained the Dharma, and taught others using secular means. Yet none of them were pulled by evil desires of fame and profit. So as long as you let go of the desire for fame and profit, you don't need to use Buddhist terms. You can use secular means as well. They had no attachment to the Dharma, much less to worldly values. As I said before, the mind which sees impermanence is one aspect of Bodhi-mind. It is totally different from what I referred from that I referred to by madman. It is totally different from that I referred to by madman. I don't have the original here. I don't know why the word I appears here. Well, anyway, Dogen Zenji is claiming that when he says seeing permanence, he means something else than the madmen that are only concerned about their fame and profit are referring to. Arousing the mind that does not bear thought, or the mind that realizes the forms of the 3,000 realms, are excellent practices after having aroused Bodhi-mind. Do not confuse these practices carelessly. Just let go of your egocentric mind and practice calmly. This is the most realistic form of Bodhi-mind. The 62 views are based on ego. 62 views. In Buddhism, there's the study of mind only. In Japanese, it's called yuishiki. In English, usually it's called a Yogacara philosophy. That's also about 2,000 years old already, where Indian philosophy analyzed how our mind is working and what our delusions consists of. And they, as a result of their analysis, found out that we have 62 different delusions, or that they're all based on 62 elements. They have a footnote here, and it says not much. Let's skip the footnote. Anyway, there are 62 views that we carry with us, and they're all based on the idea that there's an ego, there's a core in me. It was the same yesterday, then today, and tomorrow. I might be changing physically a little bit, but in the end, it's the same me that I was as a teenager. because of that view, I'm attached to myself and to fame and profit. But that's, from the Buddhist perspective, is the basic delusion. When egocentric views arise, sit quietly, illuminate them, and consider the following. What is the substance of all things inside and outside your body? What is the substance of all things inside and outside your body? You received all parts of your body from your mother and father. Your parents' red and white droplets are empty and are in no way substantial. Basically our DNA. Therefore, your body is not I. This is not me. The mind and its functions, such as consciousness, thoughts, and knowledge, bind your life moment by moment while you are alive. When inhaling and exhaling ceases, what on earth happens to your mind? When we die, what happens to the mind? The thoughts, all the knowledge that we accumulated over the years. Dogen Zenji doesn't give the answer here, but he suggests that, well, it will disappear just as the body. Therefore, the mind is not I either. You should not be attached to your body or mind. A deluded person clings to body and mind, while an enlightened person is unattached. And yet you assume the existence of the ego, though there is no ego. And you cling to life, though it is unborn. You should practice the Buddha way, but you don't. You should cut off worldly sentiments, but you don't. You dislike reality and seek after illusions. How can you avoid mistakes? Well, that's the first out of 10 points to observe while studying the way. Today I want to concentrate on this very first point, Bodhimind, arousing Bodhimind. Here in this text, Gakudoyojinshu, Dogen Zenji emphasizes seeing impermanence. If you really understand impermanence and understand it as your own problem, you are impermanent. Each one of us is impermanent. There is nothing that continues from me now to me tomorrow. And there's nothing from me 10 years ago that would be here right now. So there's no reason to be attached to that. That's what he calls Bodhimind. In another text called Tenzo Kyokun, Instructions for the Cook, I talked about that 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago, once here. He's talking about the practice of the cook. So in monasteries in Japan, also I guess in China, of course meditation practice is held in high respect, but the responsibility for the cook who's cooking for the meditating monks is also considered very important. Dogen Zenji starts saying that if the cook doesn't have Bodhimind, you might work your ass off. You will only get tired. You can make big efforts, but at the end of the day, you're only exhausted. So first you need Bodhimind. And in the Tenzo Kyokun, one definition he gives, right now I'm not wearing my robes, but the robes, they have these small, how do you say, threads? Something to tie. Threads, strings. And you can use those to tie the long sleeves together. And in Japan it's called taski. So in the old days when the ladies were still wearing kimonos in the house, they used something like that when they were cooking to bind the sleeves up. And the monks used that when they were working. Right now we also have samue, which looks like judo or karate gear when you work. But in the old days, the monks were using these long-sleeved robes most of the time. And in China, as well as in Japan, it was a sign of a high social rank. Like farmers wouldn't wear these fancy dresses. It's not everyone could become a monk. It was usually aristocrats that would become monks. It was kind of a sign of a good birth that you wear these fancy robes, and the fact that the sleeve is so long means you can't work. Nobody is expecting you to work. So when Dogen Zenji says this taski, this thread is a sign of Bodhimind, he means you tie up your sleeves and then you can work. So tying up your sleeve is a demonstration of Bodhimind. And at the end of the text, he gives 3 examples of Bodhimind. Joyful mind, old mind, and big mind, if you translate it literally. Joyful mind. That's not so easy to have a joyful mind. As I said in the beginning, I think most of us come to Buddhism because we find that life is not always so joyful. We have problems with our life. Some of us are depressed, whatever. And the Buddha is famous for discovering 2,500 years ago that life sucks, basically. That was his great discovery. We are all suffering. And a lot of people are taking kind of aback from that and say, why is he so negative? There are so many nice things about this world, so many nice things about life, and he's saying it sucks. But then there's a lot of people like me, for example, for whom that's exactly the way it is. Like, I always felt like this, but nobody was saying it. And when I first heard that saying by the Buddha, it was a big discovery for me. Oh, I'm not the first one to realize that. There was somebody before me. And of course the Buddha is not saying that we're always suffering, but there's always this little itch. It could be a little bit better. It could be just a little bit better. And even like now, you had a big lunch, and then you get even a cake and coffee. In 2 hours, 3 hours, you want something more. You're never completely happy. Or you overeat, and you wish, oh, I shouldn't have eaten so much. But rarely we feel, oh, it's exactly the way it should be. And this feeling then keeps. Maybe we feel it for an instant. We just had great sex, and then for 5 minutes everything is fine, but 5 minutes later you also already want to be out of the bed and somewhere else. So it's rarely to get this, really rare to have this feeling, oh, it's just the way it should be, and that's actually something that continues. That's what the Buddha means when he says life is suffering. It could always be a little bit better. There's always this little itch. Sometimes it's a big itch, a big pain. Sometimes it's just a little pain, but we never feel joyful mind, basically. Wow, great. I'm now, right now, this point of time, I'm this place, this person. And it couldn't be any better. We don't feel like that. We always feel, oh, could I get back 10 years ago? Or maybe in 3 years it's going to be better. Or maybe I shouldn't be here, but I don't know, in France, in America, in Japan, maybe I should go to Antaiji, but they have the new rules and I'm too old for Antaiji, I don't speak Japanese. My life would be so good if I would be in Antaiji, but it's not possible, it sucks. Or if I could, I don't want to be this person. My life would be so happy if I was Joseph, but unfortunately I can't be Joseph.
Forget it.
Well, he says so because he doesn't want to change, but yeah, he doesn't want to switch with me. So we never feel joyful mind. And Dogen Zenji says this interesting thing. Well, imagine you would be born in heaven. According to Indian philosophy, we can be reborn and we can be born in heaven. Just imagine you were born in heaven, then every day everything that you want becomes reality. You spend thousands and 10,000s of years in this paradise-like state, but never will you encounter the Buddha way. Why? Because there's no suffering. You don't ask yourself who you are. You don't ask yourself what to do with your life because you're in paradise. And according to Indian philosophy, life in heaven is long, but it's not eternal. Maybe 10,000 years, maybe 100,000 years, maybe 1 million years in paradise, but then it's over and everything is gone and you never ask yourself what to do with your life. So you should be happy that you were born as a human being and you realize my life sucks. It's not so easy to be born as a human being. Again, you could have been born as an insect, and if you compare the number of insects or maybe even viruses to human beings, the chance that you're born as an insect is so much higher that actually you should be happy that you were born as a human being. You realize my life sucks, but I can do something about it. And you actually met the Buddha way. You met with the teaching that says life sucks, but now let's work with that. Let's look into that. And now you're cooking. You're standing in the kitchen and you can cook for these monks. Great for you. And that's not so easy to realize. Usually when you're in the kitchen, at least that happened to me a lot of times, I'm thinking now these guys sitting on their meditation cushions and they're spacing out and I have to stand here and until 12 o'clock I have to make lunch. Rather than joyful mind, you feel this kind of jealous mind, angry mind, always complaining mind. But, well, thanks suffering. Thanks suffering, we are right here, right now, looking at ourselves. So Dogen Zenji says, well, take suffering the other way around. Be happy. Because without suffering, you wouldn't be here. That's one form of Bodhimind. The next one, literally old mind, is often translated as parental mind, or you could also say mature mind. When we're young, we often think that the whole universe is supposed to be about us. It's all about me. It's about what I can get out of the world. And when you get older, and for example you have kids, then maybe for the first time there's a person whom you think more about than yourself. It's not only about me anymore, but it's about the kids as well. When I die, there's people that remain in the world. And so when Dogen Zenji says old mind, it's this mind that learns to not put yourself into the center of the universe, but kind of there's this famous John F. Kennedy quote: don't ask yourself what your country can do for you, but what can you do for the country. So in that case, the case of Dogen would not be the country but the universe. When we are young, we ask, what can the universe do to make me more happy? And we have a long list of things that could happen so that I could be more happy if the universe would change in this and this and this way. And old mind is making the 180-degree flip and say, well, what can I do for the universe? That's old mind. And then there's big mind. Dogen Zenji says, well, like a mountain, like the ocean. The mountain doesn't complain when it's raining or there's wind blowing, there's dust settling on the mountain. And because the mountain accepts all that stuff piling up on the mountain, that's why it becomes a mountain. The ocean doesn't complain about, like, look at the Rhine River, it's so dirty, I don't want to have that water here, please, no. No more Rhine water. I only take clean water, only pure mineral water. If the ocean would say that, it would dry up. Because the ocean accepts all that water, it turns into the ocean. And that's what Dogen Zenji calls big mind. You take all of the aspects of reality. So in the Tenzo Kyokun, you got these, from my perspective, more accessible definitions of Bodhimind. In the Gakudoyojinshu, he says impermanence is also a good definition. And Tenzo Kyokun, he says, bind up your sleeves and be happy that you are here now. Don't put yourself in the center, but take the perspective of a parent towards your children. And have big, magnanimous mind that puts everything on your shoulders. And towards the end of his life, Dogen Zenji died when he was 53, so he didn't get very old. But towards the end of his life, he wrote a chapter of the Shobo Genzo, which is entitled Hotsubo Daishin, the same title as what I just read, Arousing Bodhimind. And in there he gives another definition of Bodhimind, which is the mind that wants to help others before you get helped, or the mind that saves others before you get saved, the mind that enlightens others before you get enlightened. For example, in the morning was very crowded here, and especially during Kinhin. I said in the beginning, well, you have maybe 60, 70 centimeters. I don't know, maybe from your tip of the nose to the next, but then when you actually stand there, that's barely 10 centimeters or so towards the back of your next person. So I don't know how you experienced it, but sometimes you feel like, okay, I want to make a step, but first he has to make a step. I can't possibly make a step. Or you make one step and then you're even closer. Why isn't he moving? Why isn't he moving? And in Antaiji it's not so crowded because we are less, but it can be a little bit. But still, compared to today, there's a meter or so. But then in Antaiji, maybe because you see each other's every day, you become less flexible. For 4 hours, it's okay, but if you have to see each other's all around the year, you get so kind of pissed off by the other guy's back that I need more space. So people start to make a step backwards in the beginning. It's just I don't want them there, so I want just a little bit space for myself. So you make a step backwards, and what happens? The guy behind you is always taking. So out of a sudden, you're making these backward steps, kinhin. So that's kind of the opposite of what Dogen's talking about here. You make the first step even before the other person makes a step. If you don't do that, nobody's going to do it. You have to make one step, and you have even less space for yourself, but then you create space behind you, and then the others will also move. But the problem with this definition, there were two problems, I think. One is, in Zen, we try to make no distinction between me and the others. I'm just an illusion. I'm impermanent. There's no me, there's no Joseph in the end. At the end of the day, there's no difference. So if that's true, why should I try to save Joseph before myself? We're connected in the first place. I can't save Joseph without saving myself at the same time. So if I try to help Joseph, I'm helping myself. Or the other way around. When I help myself, I'm helping Joseph. So, for example, when we talk about the act of giving in Zen, it's not about that I own this and I give it to Joseph and now Joseph owns it, but there's nothing. There's no property in the first place. That's what we call giving, the realization that there's actually nothing that belongs to me. Even this body. I don't own it. So I have to give it. But now it makes a big difference if you say, because there's no property, please use me as you want. Or to say, well, if that's the case, I can take everything from you that I want. All that you think is your property all belongs to me. It makes a big difference. Just as with the helping. When I help Joseph, I'm helping myself. That's fine. But if I say, okay, when I help me, I'm helping all of you. So I'm thinking about me first. It's a big difference. And I think we all tend to choose the second. Like, if everything belongs to everybody, then, well, I take whatever I need. And let the rest of you take care of yours. If I'm helping everyone by helping myself, okay, let's help myself first. So I think that's why Dogen Zenji makes the point of saying, you come last, first help the others. Even if you're not saved, even if you never become a Buddha, all you need to think about is how you can help the others to become Buddhas. But then there's the second problem. How can I help somebody to become a Buddha if I'm not a Buddha myself? How can I help anybody to attain nirvana if I have no idea where nirvana is in the first place? First, I need to attain nirvana myself, and then after I become a Buddha, I can help you later. Oh, these poor guys, they're not Buddhas yet, so let's help them after I become Buddha. That makes sense in theory, but as long as we think like that, I think we will never become Buddhas. Because as a Buddha, you need to let go of the idea of the ego. I want to be saved. I want to get enlightenment. Coming back to that point that I talked about in the beginning, Buddha realized that life sucks. Now there's different views among Buddhists about the solution he found. Some say that we have to train for a long time, and then maybe in 10 years, maybe in the next life, maybe in some life far from now, we will finally attain nirvana, get rid of suffering, and become Buddhas. That's one theory. Another theory is that our most basic delusion is this idea there must be nirvana somewhere else. So when we think that we want to become Buddhas in 10 years or in the afterlife, it's just like saying I'm working hard now so that I get rich in the future. It's the same desire. Right now I'm not happy, but when I practice a Zen and I do a number of sessions and I become a Zen master, then I'm going to be more happy. But we're following the same desire. So the way out of suffering is not that we look for the solution somewhere else, but to accept this suffering right now. You might make that experience when you do the Zen and you are in pain and you think maybe 10 more minutes, 5 more minutes, when's the bells ring, when's the bell ring, when's the bell ring. But you're only increasing the pain and the bell never rings and it feels like eternity. And you're grinding your teeth and you're fighting like a samurai, but only more pain, more pain. Or you're trying to move around and you're shifting your legs a little bit. And maybe you get to the end of the Zen, but at the end of the Zen you kind of blame yourself. Why did I move? Why couldn't I sit until the end? So you try it better next time, but again you're shifting. And although you choose to come here and sit by yourself, you only feel more miserable. What can you do? I think at the end there's nothing you can do but just accept the pain and sit with it. And if it should kill me, okay, let the pain kill me. And the moment you commit yourself to the sitting with the pain, you might realize actually it's not so bad. It's not so bad. It's not so good either, but it's not killing me. When you think I need to fight it, I have to somehow fight it, or I have to run away from it, the further you run, it will always follow you. The more you fight, the more it's pushing against you. You don't escape it, but sometimes it even feels this is killing me, this is killing me. But then when you decide, okay, let it kill me, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. So the same thing happens when you make this decision, I'm going to use this life of mine to help others, even if nobody's going to help me, even if at the end of the world I'm the only one who does not become a Buddha. If I can help the others to become Buddhas before me, actually that mind is already Bodhimind, it's the mind of a Buddha. The moment you forget about yourself. As long as you say, well, first I have to take care of my issue and I become a Buddha, and then later I can help the others. You never become a Buddha because there's still this idea of me first. Even if you say, okay, let's Joseph and myself, let's do it together. In theory, fine. We can only do it together. But there's still this idea, okay, Joseph should be safe, but also I want to go to the other shore with him. So that's why Dogen Zenji makes this explicit point, you don't go. It's a little bit like saying, I'm going to die on the cushion. But the moment you make up your mind to die, you realize, I'm alive. I'm alive. What was I complaining about? I'm alive. I'm sitting here. I have a cushion. There's a tent. Okay, it's a little bit hot, but it's not too bad. Somebody's cooking for me while I'm sitting here. The same with this. Once you make this decision to make a step for the others, create some space for the others, you realize, oh, actually, there's enough space for me. And it helps the others to make the same step. And everything, little by little, is progressing. But when right from the beginning we have this somewhere in the back of our mind, if I do this step, they're all also going to make this step, and in the end, I'm going to gain something from it. It is a win-win situation. It's already not pure body mind anymore. So we even have to forget about this win-win mind and say, okay, even if I lose everything, let me take this step. And unfortunately, it's not so easy. It's not so easy, but we can try, and maybe sometimes we succeed. Not always, I think. From my experience, it doesn't work like that always. But whenever you make that step, actually it's a great experience, because you realize, just like when you let go during the Zen, there's something that's, how do you say, catching me. I let myself drop, but that in that moment I realize there's a big hand that's catching me. It's okay that I let drop. And in our daily lives, that's also a good, important experience to make. It's okay that we let ourselves drop from time to time. And exactly in that moment where you let yourself drop, there's somebody catching you. When you open your hand, there's also willingness in others to open that hand. Often it doesn't happen right at once. Often it doesn't happen in a way that's so obvious for us. Often we have to make several steps and nothing happens. Nothing seems to happen. And only after a long while we realize, oh, actually the others were also making steps. It's just that I wasn't aware of it. That can also happen. I would like to give all of you some time also to ask questions if you have some, so I don't want to talk here forever. And maybe also you want to hear something completely different. So maybe body mind isn't really what is interesting you, but something else. So please, if you have questions, anything you would like to ask or discuss, don't hesitate. Now it's your turn. Thank you for listening for this 1 hour. So, whoever wants to ask, please raise your hand. Yes, please.
Kann ich auch in Deutsch? Englisch ist ein bisschen...
Ja, dann werde ich für dich übersetzen. Ja.
Wenn wir jetzt in die Welt schauen, die Lage ist ziemlich brenzlig. Es gibt viele Brandherde, viele Leute sind unterwegs, sind auf die Flucht. Wie kann man als buddhistische Gemeinschaft da gegenüberstehen? Oder sollte man gegenüberstehen? Sollte man nicht diese Brandherde besuchen und Stellung nehmen als buddhistische Gemeinschaft? Denn hier herrscht nur die pure Gewalt. Und vielleicht könnten wir zusammen ein Gleichgewicht herstellen.
So, well, the question basically is, it's burning all over the planet. It's burning in lots of places. People are fleeing their homes. What can we do as Buddhists? Should we maybe visit these burning places to create some kind of equilibrium? I'm not quite sure how you would do that kind of visit. Like, for example, Syria. You go to Syria and would start the Zen in the desert or somewhere in the city. You could, of course, if you have Bodhimind, you're willing to throw away body and mind, you could try to do that. To be honest, even the thought never really seriously occurred to me. But one of my students, more than 10 years ago, when the Iraq war just had started, he had the plan to go to Iraq and sit Zazen there. And I say, well, I can't advise that. Stop it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. But I think what is kind of the more realistic question, or the kind of more burning question, is like the people are already coming here without us visiting them. So I think, like, I don't see right now that it's would help the people in Syria and in other places if we would go there and do a session with them in the ruins. It's an interesting idea, and we would have to try to really find out. But I think it's more about they are already coming here, fleeing their homes. And well, in Japan, it's not an acute problem yet. So I get it only from the news. But there's millions coming to Europe, and there's those people who say, well, these guys are running for their lives. How can we not open the doors? They are running for their lives. We have to accept them here. And then there's people who say, well, wait a minute. I see that they're in trouble, but also here we have to take care of our lives, and we can take only so many people, and there's only so many work for so many people here. We have our culture that we want to protect. It's already fallen apart. And from my perspective, I can understand both. Like, as a Buddhist, my ideal would be that I want to share everything. So if people, for example, in my case, people want to come to Antai, they want to visit me, want to share my life. And I want to share my life with them. But 3 or 4 years ago, I made the step that many of you maybe realize. On the homepage, I said you can still come, but if you come, you should come for 3 years. Because if you come short term, there's not much I can do for you, and there's not much people can do for Antaiji. Also, because of the work and because of the secludedness in the winter, you need to be a certain age. You have to be physically healthy, and you should be able to communicate. Of course, the Japanese may be able to communicate to a certain degree in English, but well, if you're thinking of coming to Japan to practice in a Japanese environment, you should first study Japanese. And from my experience, it was a good thing to make that clear, because now there's more people, actually there's more people coming, they're more motivated, and they're helping me. It was good for me for the first 10 years to kind of be this one-man guest house manager, but it just was too much in the end. So I can understand that a lot of people right now feel like, yes, of course, we would like to help these people, but there's only so much we can do. So the hard question is, what can I personally do? How much can I give of myself? Ideally, everything. But in reality, for example, in my case, there's a family I need to take care of. There's the realities of the monasteries. I want, if people invite me, also I would like to visit them, but I can visit only as much. Or kind of, there's people sending me emails asking very serious questions, but sometimes I feel like, just, I'm sorry, but I can't possibly answer all of these emails. So back to the question, it's all burning all over the place now on the planet, and if you feel like you can do something, by visiting these places or by taking in the people that are coming from these places looking for help, then I think you and all of us should do as much as we can. But also we need to have respect for both ourselves and the others that say, wait a minute, I've already reached my limit. And somehow try to find a way where we can take together one step and another, but it's never be a 1 mile jump at a time. So when you ask the question, maybe we should go there and do something to create an equilibrium, for me that would be a huge step. If you ask me, well, why don't you go to Syria and sit the Zen there? For me that's a little bit too early now. I'm already busy at Antaiji. It's not that I'm putting my life at stake there, but everybody has their possibilities, and try to go a little bit over your limits, but you can't live by the ideal alone, I think. But it's certainly worth to kind of strive in that direction and try to extend the limits of your possibilities little by little. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please. Leon.
You said there is a hand which catches me.
A hand. Yes.
Can you rely on that?
If you rely on it, you're already playing tricks. It's just like this. Once I give up the idea of being saved, in that moment, Buddha's gonna save me. But you're already playing a trick there. It's not letting go anymore. So, from my experience, if the letting go is pure, I never had any bad experience. But if you say, well, I want a guarantee that it works, it's not pure letting go anymore. And I could imagine that actually you fall on your nose a couple of times. Just like with the stepping thing. Sometimes you do one step, but then if you look, it's actually something also happening for me. But it's only getting closer. Leon's standing there and it's getting closer and closer and closer. Sometimes you, or actually from your kind of the mind that you make up, you need to make up the mind that I let go even if I drop into this bottomless abyss and nobody's catching me. That's okay. Even if I'm the only one who's falling to hell because I try to help the others, that should be okay. But if you make that, if that's genuine, from my experience, somebody's going to catch you. They don't let you fall. But if you want it for sure, please give it to me on paper. I want it signed that somebody's going to catch me. You don't call that letting go anymore.
So you have to discover it anew each
yes.
time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I think so. Yes, please.
For a long time you were writing essays on your website for
Yeah.
Antaiji,
Mm.
and you don't write any essays anymore.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, why don't you write anymore, just letting us see this films of Antaiji?
I ran out of ideas.
Oh no.
Filming is so easy. I just walk around the Hondo once a week. For writing, I just have to sit down at the desk and think for hours and type for hours. And it's basically always the same when I read.
Writer's block.
Writer's block, yes. No ideas. Maybe too much Zazen. If I wouldn't do Zazen, I would have more random thoughts. Yeah.
You were writing a book, right?
Yes, yeah. It's gonna appear September 1st. And I've been writing a couple of books in Japanese as well. So if you're writing anyway, you don't feel, at least I don't feel so much that I also want the blog. For the first 10 years, the blog, these articles was the only thing that I was writing. So it was my only kind of way of expressing myself. And now in Germany, not so much, but in Japan, people ask me to write articles. They want an interview, so I don't feel that push anymore. That I want it out. But if I could get a little rest for 2 or 3 years without any writing or so, then I could imagine that something again starts to ferment. It's something wants out again. But right now, I feel like, kind of like if it was a pot, the lid has been open for quite a while, so there's no steam coming up right now. But I'm hoping for a little time where I can have the pot closed and some heat building up again, and maybe some new ideas in the future.
But then how did you start working on this new book? There must have been some steam somewhere.
A little steam, but then also again with books, like I always had the idea, like you write a book somewhere in your room and then you go to a publishing house and to a dozen of houses, and finally you find somebody who's publishing. But what often happens, obviously they have their scouts and they have the guys who have an idea, maybe we should have a book about this, and that guy should write it, and then they approach you. And that's also the case with this new book. So it was not that something, I need to write this, and then I wrote it, but rather there's an agency, they did my first book, and for, I don't know, that was 5 years ago, longer than that, 6, 7 years ago. For a long time I didn't hear from them, but then now they approached me again and said, it's been a while that you wrote the first book, how about second book, and life and death might be an interesting theme. So I said, okay, life and death, that concerns me as well. Maybe I can write a book about that. So that's what I did.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anything else you want to talk about? Yes?
How do I realize that I'm practicing correctly, or could you say that there's a correct way to practice?
As long as you feel that there's still something that's not perfect, I think you're on the right track. There might not be lots, but there's, in the spiritual community, there's a number of people who think that they're actually enlightened or practicing correctly. Some of them think they're doing it the most correct way. And that's the worst thing that can happen to you, that you fall into that pit and you think, I'm a Buddha, I'm doing it the right way, and whoever disagrees is wrong. So as long as you're not sure if you're doing it right, you're on the right track. Like Dogen Zenji in a text called Gakudoyojinshu says, Buddhas are the ones that realize that they are deluded. And the deluded ones are the guys who think they are Buddha.
It's Genjo-koan.
Genjo-koan, exactly. So as long as you're aware that you're not enlightened, you're actually pretty close. And the moment you think, I got it, there's a little problem there.
Okay.
So take care that you don't get enlightened. And maybe you're not sure if you're doing it right. Well, that's good. That's good. If you're sure this is right, what only it's going to cause conflict. Even inside Zen, and even in this Sawaki tradition where Antaiji belongs to, there's this fight, who's doing it the true Sawaki way? Is Antaiji doing it right? Or Sawaki, there's Deshimaru in Europe, but then there's different Deshimaru groups, and in Japan there's different Sawaki groups, and everybody thinks, I'm doing it right. And it's all about fame and profit, no about Bodhimind. If you're not so sure, I might be wrong. Good. There's already Bodhimind starting to sprout there. If you're not so sure if you're right, very good.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't look for a way to tell I'm right, but rather ask yourself and continue to ask yourself, Am I right? Maybe not. Maybe not. And then you can continue also to learn.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Is there something we do with like the cultural difference between Europe and Japan in the practice in anti-Chi?
Is there something I do with that?
I say it wrong, but yeah.
What I sometimes tell my students is that you should grow like a cucumber. When you're studying with a teacher, your ordained monk, you're studying the Buddha way, you should grow like a cucumber. And what I mean is, when you grow a cucumber, all you need is one piece of thread, and if you plant the cucumber at the bottom of the thread, it will grasp that thread and climb by itself. And if you plant them in the spring, in the summer you have the cucumbers. They need some water and some fertilization, but they do the rest. In the case of the student, it means this thread would be the teaching of the Buddha, or the teaching that you receive from your teacher, but you have to grasp and grow by yourself. And what I realize among my Japanese students a lot is that they grow less like cucumbers, but more like tomatoes, which are also delicious in the summer, but one thread is not enough. You kind of have to build a firm structure, and you have to tie them to the structure, and you have to remove these extra shoots. So tomatoes need a lot of attention, and they have not so much, how do you say, this kind of idea of I'm responsible for my growth. It's rather like let the teacher and let my seniors, also very important in the Japanese system, there's the seniors, the juniors, the seniors take care of the juniors. So you enter the system and then you leave everything to the system and let the system do the work. And in Antaiji, on purpose, the system is pretty weak. So if you come there with a tomato attitude, you don't grow. So then people ask me, well, how about your Western students? Do they all grow like the cucumbers? And then I have to say, no, unfortunately, they grow more like pumpkins. And pumpkins, when they're small, they look just like cucumbers. Like when there's the first two leaves, it's almost the same. But if you got a pumpkin inside the cucumbers, they grow all over the place and say, me, 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 me. They're always... if you don't have enough space, just like Kinin, I need more space for myself. Like in Antaiji, we have maybe a meter between the pumpkins in the pumpkin field. So they need a lot of space to grow and kind of... Here, they're all very important, the pumpkins. Well, I come also from this culture. I like, here's me, and that's my practice. And so it's not a kind of question of which is good or which is bad, but each of these cultures, the Western culture, the Japanese culture, they have their strong points. Like the Japanese, they're much better at kind of being in harmony with others and kind of living together in a group without asserting themselves too much. So they're much better in taking a step back and harmonizing with others, taking the perspective of others, but then there's less initiative that they take. While with the Western visitors, some of them, they've come only 1-2 weeks, and then they already develop a lot of ideas what could be done better in Antaiji. Why don't you change this, this, this? And that's, in a way, it's also good that people have this initiative and they feel responsible for Antaiji, although they've just arrived. But if you tell them, well, wait a minute, you don't really know the whole thing. First you stay here for 1 year and then you understand how things are connected. There's a lot of like, I can't wait for a whole year. I have to make a change now. So that's kind of the pumpkin attitude, which is also sometimes helpful to have people who take this initiative and say, okay, I can start a team here and I know how to do this job and I'm going to do it. But the ideal would be somewhere in between, the cucumber that grows by itself, but it's also aware of this fine line here, and there's a neighbor that's also growing in the same direction, so I also have respect for these guys and I try to cooperate with them while I'm growing. But that's the metaphor is kind of easy to explain, but then to do it in reality is not so easy. When you're actually living together and you have to cook for each other and you have to share a room and you share daily practice and you share discussions with each other, there's a lot of collisions between the pumpkins and the tomatoes. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Do you have any advice for lay people how to think that we're impermanent all the time so that we can raise Bodhimind? I mean, it's especially I think as lay people, it's not so easy to just say, okay, I don't look for fame and I don't look for profit because I see it in myself. It's there all the time and it pops up all the time. I don't know really how to keep that with it.
Huh?
Keep practicing.
Keep practicing. Keep practicing.
For all powers.
Yeah. I guess often, well, if you're seriously living in a secular world, you have a job, you have to compete, you have to make compromises and play with the rules of the game to a certain degree. But you just have to remind yourself, at the end of the day, it's just a game. It's a game, and you have to ask yourself, how much of your life do you want to invest that game? Is it really worth to invest more than you have to? And, well, to find that way where you're just playing by the rules enough to get by in the world, but still you're not compromising too much, so that you don't feel that you're actually letting yourself be sucked up by that machine. Well, you have to, as she says, keep practicing and find a way that you're not dissatisfied with your own answer that you're giving. Maybe that's one reason why we have monasteries, so that makes it easier to make less of a compromise and give up all of yourself, because the monastery, it's not a refuge from the world, but it kind of creates an environment where it's easier to completely let go and people will still catch you. While, just as Leon pointed out, you can't be really sure that anybody's really catching you when you give up yourself. If you would say, okay, Muho said everything's impermanent, so I'm going to give up everything, my property, please come to my house tomorrow, take what you want. And there's a high chance if you put that on the internet that people will actually come to your house and take everything and say, oh, thank you. And nobody's going to catch you, maybe. So you have to a certain degree, play the game that's played, but if possible, you try to not get sucked up into the game, and if possible, just like the first question suggested, maybe you can even do something to change the game. Like, there are so many losers in the game, we are not always winners ourselves, but actually on a global scale we are on the winning side. So right now we are playing this game, we are winning. What can we do to help those that are not winning? How can we help to maybe change the game to make it a more fair game? It's not an easy thing, so I'm not sure how much change I can do during this life, but I try to do a little bit, and I think we should cooperate and try to affect a little change. Okay, I would like to thank you for being here, joining in the practice, coming for the talk. and hopefully it's not going to be the last time. I'm not sure when I'm going to come back next time, but if I come back, I'm sure we can work something out again. This is something like my home base here in Europe. So I hope to see you again then as well. Thank you very much today.
Thank you.